Hi everyone, it's Janine here. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's card, I am going to use the MFT Mini Cloud border stencil along with a sentiment from the Lawn Fawn Easter party. I'm also going to use the Lawn Fawn gingham backdrops just to create some pattern on some of the images, and I will show you that in a second. I'm going to be making the Chickie paper bag accessory for Mama Elephant this time, and I've also used the meadow borders from Lawn Fawn along with the butterflies and not any of the flowers. And then I'm also using the Lawn Fawn small stitched oval, this sort of third size in from the outside, and the like egg shape or the crack for the egg from the favor bag to create my own eggs, because I had no egg dyes in my stash. So I created my own, sort of. So to start with, I've got a piece of I believe this is Bristol cardstock, or is it? No, this might not be. This might be just regular box standard cardstock, just white cardstock. And I'm going to use some speckled egg distress oxide ink for my clouds. I thought this was a nice like tone of blue or shade of blue for clouds, and quite sort of Eastery. But you could, if you use this with a slightly more grey, maybe like a weathered wood or something, you could create like a stormy sky. I mean, I know there is a stormy sky colour, but you could create like a slightly stormier sky. But I thought this looked nice for like a spring Eastery kind of card. So just getting this on. I don't need to go all the way down the bottom, but I went fairly far down. And I love how this stencil just creates these fabulous clouds. Every time I'm always surprised at how well it turns out, because it doesn't always start off that way. So I spritz that with some water because it's oxide. It will react a little bit. Well, the ink will react, but it depends on the paper that you're using. So it's very subtle in this case, but it's there. So, and then I have some mowed lawn distress oxide that I'm going to use for the grassy borders, the meadow borders from Lawn Fawn. And these are cut using some, I've just got loads of like textured cardstock. It's quite thin cardstock. So I cut using one of the greens, which is kind of a limey-ish colour green, and then used some mowed lawn over the top just to give it a bit of depth on the top of the grass there. And because of those little grassy black blades of grass, they're quite delicate. So I kind of go from the cardstock off to give them a bit of colour, and then just blend the sort of solid areas. And again, spritz with some water just for texture and a bit of fun in the background. And then those will dry off. Again, it's not the right kind of cardstock to create fancy you know, textures and fun effects on, but if you spritz it and just let it be, it will, you can usually get the cardstock, whatever cardstock you've got, to work. So again, I've got some textured yellow cardstock here, and I'm just using some tea dye ink around the edges just to give it a bit of, again, a bit of text, a bit of interest in the, you know, for it. This is also the chick's head, basically, and then spritzed with some water. Again, the spritzing for animals gives them a bit of, like, gives their fur, if they're furry or fluffy, gives them some texture, like added texture, and that look of texture, if that made sense. Anyway, so I'm going to use the large stamp, which is the smaller gingham pattern, and I thought I was going to use the use my Tim Holtz stamp platform for this, but that stamp was super sticky, and I couldn't get it to lift up where I wanted it. So in the end, you do not need to do what I'm about to do, but for some reason my brain just went to this place. I could have actually just stuck it to my glass media mat, or I could have stuck it directly to the top of the stamp platform, and that would have worked just fine. I did not need to put it onto an acrylic block. So So I am taking, I think this was Salvage Patina, distressing in oxide as well, and I've got my quote unquote eggs that I've made, and I'm popping them on top of that with a piece of paper towel. You can use a piece of copy paper over the top, just holding it in place and then rubbing all over it to get that pattern all over. This is an old school technique. And then I have this nice pattern on top of this light blue cardstock. So again, I inked up that area. And this time I'm just going to turn my other half of an egg at an angle, just so that the pattern goes in a slightly different direction. Again, just for something a little bit different because they are the same colour. So, and then I will have a slightly different pattern, same pattern, but different direction. So just getting this cleaned up because there's a lot of ink on there. I could have carried on with it, stamping it on something else if I wanted to. So just get rid of that. And then what I do want to use the platform for is to stamp my sentiment. Excuse me. But what I'm going to do first, I believe, is stick this to the main black card piece, because of all those, again, because all those little blades of grass, it's kind of tricky to line that up nicely, for me anyway. I kind of need to look at my sentiment the right way up, so you could do it upside down and then use the edge of the grass up against the edge of the platform. Also, these are longer than or wider than the card base, not the card base, but the piece, the cloudy border, cloudy background. And so for placement of like where I wanted the sentiment exactly, that wouldn't have worked, because I may have not lined it up quite right in the middle or something, if I landed up having to cut the grass panel down after I'd stamped the sentiment. So I decided to put it onto the cloudy backdrop. I also moved that one piece of grass slightly higher, just because the chick is kind of a big statement on this card, and so I moved the background slightly higher. You're not going to know that it's a shorter piece. You're just not going to know. But it means that in the background there's more grass higher up behind him. So now that I have that set in place, I can now add my sentiment onto the grassy area where I want it, which is roughly in the middle, because me and straight lines and centralizing things don't go too well. but I make it work. And I also have two parts to the sentiment, a bit like the last card that I made. And so I want part of the sentiment in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is just a nice rich black ink for sentiments especially, but I use it for a lot of other things. And I then want to add in the word spring, but I want that in a different color. So what I'm going to do is I'm cleaning off the stamp after I'd stamped that first part in, and then I'm going to line up the word spring where I think I want it on my platform. What I could have also done is lined it up after I cleaned the first part of the sentiment. I could have left that on the platform and then lined up my word spring next to it so that it had the right spacing, but this works too. I then realized that this wasn't the right color. It was too pale. So I will grab a slightly darker blue oxide ink and just try and see which one I go with. I think I go with Mermaid Lagoon, which works out perfect. What I should have been a bit more careful about as well was I should have been a little careful when I cleaned it off, because I actually moved it slightly. It's not the end of the world. It's given it a slightly blue shadow from the previous ink that I used, and it still looks nice. So it just was a more intense blue, and the oxides are great because they're a combination of pigment and dye. They will sit on top of the paper, which is handy when you want a different color, like color on color like this. It's quite nice to have that sort of option. So now to put my little chick together, I believe oh no, before I do that, I'm actually going to use some Copic markers to give some extra shading and texture to the different pieces. So this is his little beak, and I'm going to use the blender pen, although it's running out, to add some extra shading in that. I think I also switched to just colours rather than two different colours, so a lighter and a darker colour, just to give some extra depth and dimension. You could use pencils for this as well. It doesn't have to be an alcohol marker, but an alcohol marker works really nicely. And especially if you've got like the brush tip, you can create like a feathered look, which I thought on his little, like, and they're not hands, but on his little hands, it just gives it a nice little bit of texture and fun. So I will do that for these are like his, like I say, not his hands, but his hands. I don't know what they're called. Claws, I suppose. And I will then bring in some other pieces that I'm going to use as well. So I've got this little butterfly. This is just for the background. So I'm actually using, this is a pale yellow. Again, it's a texture cardstock I'm trying to use up. And I'm just using YR02, which is like a yellow red. It's like a pale orangey colour, and it just makes such a difference on that butterfly. So it's completely, I mean, it's a colour that works with, so it's in the same colour family, but it just makes such a difference because it's so much darker than the pale yellow butterfly. And then some darker red for the little, I don't know what that thing on the top of the head is called. That little like tufty thing that little chickens have. I think it's more like roosters have that, don't they? Anyway, that little thing, I just use a slightly darker red. And then again for his glasses, which I think is the best bit of this whole little thing, is in 2 shades of red. Again, just to give some depth to the glasses. So now I have his little parts and pieces and his face and everything ready. I'm going to, I think, work out where I want to pop him and the 2 eggs, because I've got the 2 eggs I've got to get in there as well. And also working out where I want to put his face and everything else. So so I will work out, I think I'll end up sort of putting his face together off the card, and just putting him together basically. And then I will also put his hands as if they're holding the egg or half of the egg. I will attach that all in one and then add them in separately. It just made the most sense for me. Do what works for you. If it's easier for you to pop his main part of his body in place and then work around the sort of blades of grass, then do that, because like I say, sometimes I have to do things like that so that I can actually see what I'm doing, if that makes sense. Because I didn't want to get like his face too high up or something. So then putting his little beak on, it's just the cutest thing. And as soon as those eyeballs go in, oh my hat, it is the cutest thing ever. So I can't wait for this bit. This is the best bit for me. Oh, let's get his little tuft on there. I don't know what, like I say, I don't know what that thing's called. I grew up on a farm, I should know this stuff, but I don't. So it's just so cute though. And then these these are just real cheap tweezers that I've had for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, but they're kind of like reverse tweezers. I think that's what they're called. Honestly, if you don't have any, have a look for some and get yourself some. They are so handy for sticking little pieces and then holding them in place while the wet adhesive dries. Super handy when there's tiny pieces. So while the little tufty thing is drying, I'm going to stick I'm going to put the eyes on now, and I'm going to make him a little cross-eyed. I think it's so funny. Isn't that the cutest thing ever? I don't know. I love it. I think he's so funny and super, super cute. So, yeah, it kind of reminds me, my husband actually mentioned this, it kind of reminds us of Chicken Little. So yeah, anyway. So I'm going to now stick the little claws, paws, whatever we're calling them, his little hands, onto the egg, and then I can tuck that in place, if that makes sense. I think. This was a while ago when I did this. Yeah, so I'm going to put the hands where they need to be on this little egg, or one half of the egg. And like I say, this is my makeshift egg. I don't own any egg dyes. So it was that moment where I was like, that's definitely something I need for my stash at some point. But this works. Yeah, it works for the most part. So, and I thought it was clever on my part because I don't normally think out the box that much. So now I'm going to stick the little chicken. I'm going to get him stuck into place. Just with some dry adhesive. I use a combination of different adhesives. You guys would have known that by now. I like my dry adhesive because it's quick and it's simple. And as long as you don't stick most of them, as long as you don't like properly stick it down, you can kind of lift and maneuver things a little bit. Wet adhesive is a little more tricky. Once it's down, it's down. So it's a little hairier to try and get it off if you've put it not quite in the right place, even though you do have a bit more wiggle room with a wet adhesive. But yeah, I use all of them. I have even one of those, blue while it's, like permanent when it's a blue ink, blue colour, and then when it's clear it's a temporary adhesive, that sort of thing, like a quickie glue pen type of thing. I have like a knockoff brand as well that I use, but that doesn't change colour. It's still blue, which I realised afterwards, but anyway, but that works pretty well for little things, because I think sometimes you need a wet adhesive for the teeny tiny pieces. But find what works for you. I love adhesive. I try adhesives, different adhesives all the time, just to see what works better for me. And then eventually you'll find your happy ground with it. So for the butterfly, I just sort of pinched it in the middle so that it could go, so I can lift the wings, and then I'm only putting adhesive just in the middle part of the body, so that again, once it dries properly, I can lift those wings up a little bit more. It just gives a bit of dimension to the butterfly. And then I have a bright yellow card base that I thought worked really nicely for this little guy. It's only a smidge bigger than the main part of the card, but I think it adds something to it. And then of course I put the other half of the egg in the next to him in the grass. So I've got a black gel pen here, glaze pen, sorry, for the eyes. I could have used glossy accents, that would work perfectly well too, or like a crystal glaze from Nouveau, that works wonders. Anything to make them just a little bit shiny. And then I have got a white gel pen, which this is a new love. I've fallen in love with this pen again, and just adding detail to different areas. Now on the glasses, what I should have done, because I will add some glossy accents, or maybe it was the glaze to that, what I should have done is let the glaze dry first and then add the white gel pen on top. The white gel pen kind of goes funny underneath it. I don't know why. So I should have, and I've seen this being done the other way around before. I've watched loads of videos where people always say, put it on afterwards, and I totally forgot. So I will add some glaze to his glasses, because I just thought it made sense to give at least the rim of the glasses some shine. I also added a little body to the butterfly, and just so that it, just added. And also it adds in another bit of black in that part of the card, because there's not an awful lot of that on the card, other than his eyes and part of the sentiment. And this is where I'm adding in the glaze. Now if you really wanted to, you could add glaze not only to the frames but to the inside of the glasses, so that it looks like glass. So that would be very cool as well. I didn't know how much glaze I actually had, because although it's a small image, it's quite a large pair of glasses. So But yeah, you could do that too, and that would look really, really cool. So I hope you've enjoyed this, guys. I love this chick. I love those glasses. I just think he's so, so sweet. And I hope that you are having a good start to your spring. And yeah, I will see you in the next one, guys. Bye for now.